Okay, we're going to be on to chapter 20 here. Bob Lollar is coming home. And just to give you an idea, this is the original binder that has my entire novel in it when I first wrote it in 1997. And just to show you, here's the pages. It was actually printed with the old dot matrix printer, you know, those noisy rat-a-tat-tat machines. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what 300 pages looks like. Kept it all in this binder all these years. And then I reprinted it again when I saved it and put it into three of these smaller 3-ring binders with the dates on it so you could actually see which chapters were in which binder. And we're just about, this will be the last chapter in this 3 out of 5 binders. So, so here we go. So Friday was here, the day Bob Lollar was coming home for his visit. The team had started out the season with all wins, and we were higher than a kite. The Tabbies were back together. Gloria and I were getting along well, to say the least, and we were all beginning to wonder about Becky and Bolton connection. The Lollars, including Becky, were so looking forward to seeing Bob again, hoping to find out just exactly what his plans were for the near future. Bob was being flown in from flight school by a friend, Jack Murphy, who was originally from Boston. He was commandeering a military jet for some needed airtime and was putting it into good use to bring Bob home to Hartford. Bob and Jake drove down in a rental car, and Mary and Gus came to the front door for what seemed like every 5 minutes since 10 o'clock. It was now 11:45, and the rented Lincoln pulled in the driveway. They ran to the car as the screen door banged against the frame. "Bobby, Bobby," shouted Mary, with Gus trailing right behind her. She threw her arms around his neck as he barely made it out of the passenger seat, and she seemed to squeeze the life out of him. "Mom, Mom," said Bob, laughing. "I'm going to be home for a while, if you let me breathe, that is." Mary started laughing as tears streamed down her face as she caressed his cheeks with her thin little fingers. God, I thought, she loves that boy or what? Gus moved in to give Bob a firm pat on the back and then squeezed the top of his shoulders. "It's really good to have you home, son," said Gus. "We sure miss you around here." I moved slowly down to the car while all this is going on. "You must be Bill," said Bob as he extended his hand and gave me a firm welcome. "It's good to finally meet you," Bob added. "I'd like for all of you to meet Jake Murphy." Jake moved around the car, removing Bob's luggage and placing it in the driveway. "How you all doing?" said Jake to everyone, and no one in particular. "I guess you're happy to see this lug of a pilot, or what?" said Jake. That was the understatement of the year. "Let's go inside," said Mary. "Lunch is already, and we can talk as we eat. Bill and Gus need to get to the ballpark soon anyway," she added, taking charge. We all moved into the house and into the kitchen, positioning ourselves around the table. It immediately became apparent for the next week or so this table was going to be about 3 feet too short, with all the company about to descend upon the Lollar's household to experience the great return of Bob Lollar, star athlete, officer, and pilot. As if the events of last week had not been enough already for everyone. Bolton and Becky came into the kitchen, and Becky was giving her older brother a big hug. "Oh, Bob, it's good to have you home," said Becky warmly. "Seems like I haven't seen you in years, not just the 9 months it's been," she added. "Nice to see you too, sis," said Bob. "It is so good to be home again." We all sat down and began to filling the room with small talk. Gus next to Bob, constantly rubbing his shoulder, the way of showing deep affection for the son he had. You could sense the love and how much he truly missed Bob being gone. Mary finished putting items for lunch on the table as we began to eat. Bob, would you say grace for us? Asked Mary. Sure, Mom, said Bob. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us all together again today. Bless this food and all who partake in it. Give us the strength to face our futures and the opportunities ahead. Help us to continue to care for one another and remember how important family and friends are to all of us. We ask you for our blessings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen, concluded Bob. Wow, I thought to myself, I never heard any young person pray a prayer like that over a meal. Such conviction and sincerity. I knew then that Bob Lollar was a complicated person, not just some Bible-thumping loony. He looked at me from across the table and gave me a big, warm grin. I was thinking of him like he was an older brother who had always totally mesmerized the younger sibling. This was going to be very interesting, very much so. Bob filled in everyone as to his plans over lunch. I've already enrolled at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago for September, and I'm definitely headed for a career in the ministry, stated Bob. Mom and Dad, Bob continued, I know this may be of some surprise to you, but I never felt more positive about anything in my life. The Lord seems to be telling me that he wants me to work with kids somehow. Those in trouble at school and with the law. I don't know. I'm not sure what the master plan is, but it just feels so right, he concluded. Son, we're so proud of you, said Mary. You have always succeeded at what you did, and you were always totally committed. If you feel that God has called you to do this, you have to do it. You can always count on our support. The family will always be here. Remember that. That's right, son, said Gus. We'll be here if you ever need us. We'll miss you, but we're sure going to be glad to be able to come out to Cubland, won't we, Bill? Said Gus, as he was trying to secure me as his Chicago tour guide as well in advance. The tour guide was definitely me. No problem, I chirp in. Couldn't have you Connecticut crackers getting lost in the Windy City now, could I? I might even take you to Wrigley Field, the most beautiful ballpark God ever built. Bob smiled at my weak attempt at religious humor. Geez, I thought, maybe God didn't even like baseball. Maybe he thinks it's just another stupid waste of time, another man-made human experience. Maybe he has Bob doing what's important and gave us this game to keep us somewhat preoccupied so as not to do more damage to ourselves than we already have. Oh, what do I know? Such philosophical thought is well beyond me at this point. I suppose you think that there is ivy-covered walls in heaven as well, asked Bob with a big grin. Maybe God prefers the beautiful facade of the Yankee Stadium. The Yanks have certainly won more World Series than the Cubs, I believe. I might be led to think that maybe God has spent more time in Yankee Stadium than Wrigley Field, or at the very least, sent a lot more angels to look out for the Yankees. God knows they have sure had some characters playing for them who needed some divine intervention. Don't ask me if God cares who really wins the games, though, said Bob. I'm really just curious about the real issue of free will and trying to understand just how much the great theological scholars believe God manipulates our lives for his purpose. I'm not convinced that he manipulates us at all. The devil, on the other hand, is quite another story, added Bob, with great conviction. The room had grown sullen and quiet as the conversation took this serious turn. Bob could tell we were all taken aback by his remarks. I'm sorry, said Bob sheepishly, as he looks around the table at everyone. I didn't mean to go off the deep end. It is just that the intellectual side of this issue is as interesting as the spiritual side, at least to me anyway. I won't bore you any more yet. "It's okay, son," said Gus, breaking the ice for all of us. "Don't mind us. It will just take us some time to get used to having a preacher in the house, that's all. We probably could all use it." Gus was right about that statement, I thought. No truer words were ever spoken. "Okay," said Bob. "What does everybody had planned for today? What would you like for me to do?" The room began to start buzzing again with chatter. Back to normal at last. Plans were made for Bob and Jake to come around to the game around 5 o'clock, but Jake had to be in the air by 9 p.m., meaning he might only get to see a few innings before he left for Hartford and Boston. Bob insisted he take Jake back to Bradley. Jake tried to talk him out of it and get him to stay with the family for a day, but Bob insisted that after all Jake had done to get Bob home, it was the least he could do. Bob, as usual, won the argument. "Bill, let you and I go for a walk," announced Bob. "I want to go downtown and see old man Bowling's sports locker," I say. "What about you?" "Sure, that'd be fine with me," I reply. "I hear he's a great guy, older than some of the dirt around here." "Mom and Dad, Bill and I'll be back in about an hour, okay?" asked Bob, seeking approval more than permission. "Go ahead, son," replied Gus. "Take your time. George will be glad to see you, I know." Bob and I head out as Jake moves into the lawn chair in the front yard with a glass of Mary's lemonade and the New York Times. "I'll guard the fort for a while you're gone, Bob. If I can stay awake that long," added Jake. "No problem," said Bob. "You've got to be exhausted after this past week you put in." As we began our walk, Bob told me about Jake. He had flown over 60 hours this past week with training and some classified airtime. I don't know what it was about, only that it was my secret security clearance was not enough to let me know what Jake's top secret clearance and its missions had been. "Jake is as close to a Top Gun as I will ever meet," added Bob. "It must be somewhat exciting for Jake, but Jake has made it clear that he couldn't and wouldn't start a family until this part of his career was over. Jake didn't want a wife and his kids to go fatherless and husbandless someday. He had seen enough of that. Jake is a real class act. Most people wouldn't be more selfish than that." We moved down the drive and onto the sidewalk. Bob continued the conversation. "I talked to Mom last night," said Bob. "I wanted to talk to you about Gloria, now that Mom has told me the two of you are getting along pretty well, getting close and all." I couldn't tell right away if this conversation was headed for trouble or not. Was he going to be mad at me for moving in into his territory and his girl? Or did he not care? I was feeling somewhat uneasy and very apprehensive. Bob continued. First of all, I want you to know that I'm very happy for you and Gloria are together, and I hope it works out for you." Thank God, I thought to myself, trying not to let my relief be noticeable. I dodged the professional Scud missile here, I knew. "I care for Gloria very much," added Bob, "but it just never seemed to be in the cards for us. I don't know why. I never really understood how we just could never make that final push or a commitment to each other. I know it was probably my fault. I was just too afraid. I've never been really good at showing real affection in a woman and a man's relationship that sort of way. I know I care. It's just that the physical part is hard for me. I was just afraid." You could tell that Bob was very serious and very sincere in what he said. "I began to guess that maybe this is what God really intended for me anyway," stated Bob matter-of-factly. "The scripture states that he knows us in the womb. Seems unbelievable, doesn't it? That someone could know you before you were even born, take a breath, open your eyes. That seems far-fetched to a lot of people. The pro-abortionists have no belief in that last statement. You are not considered viable, a human being, until they decide you are not, an inconvenience to their lives. Unfortunately for them, God will not be doing the deciding on Judgment Day. and they will not get to decide what's convenient and not them. Abortion is the ultimate act of selfishness, added Bob with conviction and some anger in his voice. God will decide it all in the end. There will be no other issue that floods the gates of hell more than this. This issue is for these last generations, added Bob. The liberals wanted separation of church and state only when it is convenient for their sick agenda. They may win the powerful political battles and feel comfort in their newfound power. The road to hell is paved in line with good intentions. Faceless children who have died at these politically correct hands, with these children calling out their names as their murderers make a long trek to hell. Christians don't kill their unborn children for convenience. Bob continued, the real truth is this country has totally lost its spiritual and moral conscience, convictions, and most of all its leadership. That is the legacy we all must live with, concluded Bob, with much sadness in his voice. The truth is, added Bob, that there are a lot of churchgoers in this country, but a very low percentage of real Christians. How sad is that? You could tell how much he was hurt by the abortion issue and how deeply moved he was to talk about it and do something about it if he could. This guy was certainly wiser than his years would indicate. Bob was a most interesting person. Being a friend to him would be a challenge for her. Here was a guy truly wanting to tackle the issues of today, and I was more worried about going 2 for 5 tonight. Boy, did I have some priorities to rearrange in my life. It would just have to be a little bit later. For whatever reason Bob Lollar had, he seemed to have a handle on where he believed his life direction was supposed to be. Whether he was feeling the true divine inspiration, that seemed to be the motivating force in one's choosing the ministry as a career, or more as a way of life. Only Bob can know for sure. There was no doubt he was committed. I felt very happy for him, and that he was now at peace with himself about it, and seemed to be putting his recruiting nightmare behind him. He seemed to have made that conscious decision to turn that negative into a positive. Hey, Bill, shot Bob, what about you? You are still some kind of mystery man to most of us. Tell me about your family and how you made your way to the Nutmeg State. Well, it's not too much to tell, I respond. I grew up in a medium-sized town west of Chicago. It was originally called Hastings Mills. The town was mostly blue-collar community, with the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad having a terminal at the roundhouse, there for heavy maintenance work for the trains. The town had started out and had about 50,000 people in it, but now it was much more than double that number. It now has the same serious problems as any large city in the country. My dad had suffered the complications of polio when I was 7. He spent his last year at home in a rocking bed since there was no more they could do for him for a prolonged hospital stay. He spent a long time in an iron lung to help him breathe. I remember spending hours and hours at the hospital when I was 4 and 5 just visiting my dad. I know I couldn't understand what happened or what was wrong with my dad. I just remember sitting at the head of his iron lung stroking his hair.